Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to RSN's Women's Talk, celebrating phenomenal women in rural health. My name is Wachari, and I'm joined by Anisa, and we will be your hosts this afternoon.
August marks Month in South Africa, a time where we can celebrate the brave women of the movements of 1956 and all other strong, fearless, and phenomenal women who have come after them. It is without a doubt that women today are still plagued by societal indifferences to their male counterparts, and although the brave women of the past have paved the way for our generations, the baton still needs to be passed down to many generations of women before this work is complete. In light of that, today we honor the phenomenal health professionals who have gladly and very successfully taken up the baton to continue the work in rural healthcare. Today we acknowledge them, we see them, we celebrate their good work for all the communities with which they have worked.
We're probably going to spend at least half the talk reading these bios because I'm just amazed. We're graced by greatness on this panel today, and these are probably the names that come up when people think of phenomenal women in rural health, and we are honored to hear from them today.
We are joined by Dr. Jenny Nash. Dr. Jenny Nash graduated from UCT in 1996 with an MBCHB degree. She completed her internship in Pietermaritzburg at the end of 1997. In 1998, she and her recently married husband, Stephen, an agricultural engineer, moved to Msileni Hospital in northern KwaZulu-Natal, where they lived and worked for 10 years during her time at Msileni Hospital. She completed a master's in family medicine and diploma in HIV management. While working at Msileni Hospital, she had the opportunity of being part of a team who coordinated the first district-based antiretroviral program in KwaZulu-Natal. In 2008, she and her family moved to a small holding outside East London, where she worked in the primary healthcare clinics in the Great Kai local municipality, and actively worked to expand the antiretroviral program in the clinics. In January 2015, she joined the Amatole District Clinic Specialist team as the family physician. The DCST supports 12 district hospitals, 1 TB hospital, 1 psychiatric hospital, 5 community health centers, and 145 primary healthcare clinics. When asked where her office is, she says, "My car." She is passionate about providing integrated quality primary healthcare and mentoring and teaching healthcare workers. She has 2 teenage daughters, Anya and Kirsten.
We are also joined by Dr. Nomlindo Makubalo, who was born in Mleni in Eastern Cape, and she's the mother of a 9-year-old son. She's a community pediatrician who advocates for children and is currently working as District Clinician Specialist, DCST, in Nelson Mandela Bay Health District, while acting as a Provincial District Clinical Specialist. She's currently a deputy chairperson of Committee on Morbidity and Mortality in Children Under 5 years. She's the executive member of Children Problem Identification Program. She's the member of Child Task Team of Children Problem Identification Program and a member of National Advisory Group on Immunization. In 2016, she was awarded the Rural Doctor of the Year award. Some of her academic qualifications include a diploma in medical technology, an MBCHB from UCT, a diploma in child health, FCPED, advanced health management program from Yale University, and a diploma in HIV management, just to name a few.
We are also joined by Dr. Pam McLaren. Dr. Pam McLaren, an occupational therapist, graduated at WITS in 1971, the first group to attain a Bachelor of Sciences in OT. After working at the spinal unit at Conradie Hospital in Cape Town, She took up an OT post at the rural Oshakati Hospital in Ovambo, northern Namibia. Here she developed an interest in African basketry and an insight into the plight of rural disabled people who traveled from as far as southern Angola for orthopedic services, i.e. prosthesis and amputations. After working at Baragwanath Hospital in 1974, she registered to do her master's degree at Wits, being employed as a junior lecturer for 3 years. She graduated in 1978 as the first OT with a master's of science in OT. She worked as a volunteer at Manguzi Hospital in northern KwaZulu-Natal, setting up Ngezandla Zethu, an indigenous materials and crafts project to assist mothers in primary health care nutrition rehabilitation program. Subsequently, she pioneered the concept of community-based rehabilitation while employed there for 30 years. She obtained her PhD in community health at Wits, entitled The Prevalence of Reported Motor Disability and Confirmed Motor Impairment and the Impact of Disability and Handicap in Rural Community in KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. During the 1980s, she helped facilitate the formation of the Rural Disability Action Team to mobilize therapists and health workers to become advocates for rural disability across remote rural areas in South Africa. From 1995, she has worked as a disability researcher with the Disability Action Research Team based in Howick in KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa with a colleague. She was the moderator for Disability Listserv, hosted by the Health Systems Trust. She is passionate about action research and networking, is a staunch advocate for disability, committed to disseminating information in the hopes that this will impact on service delivery for all persons with disabilities, especially those living in rural areas in South Africa and beyond its borders. She is involved at the local Umgeni municipal level in the Midlands of KwaZulu-Natal, raising awareness about children's rights, children with disabilities, and social and environmental issues, setting up a network, Tuma. She is a founder of Rural Rehab South Africa in 2011 and voluntarily assisted with membership and advice on research matters in the light of re-engineering PHC and the National Health Insurance initiatives by the Department of Health in South Africa. She has kept in touch with policy and implementation issues, co-authoring the framework and strategy of disability and rehabilitation in South Africa 2015 to 2020 with Marika Bazoudenhait and Kate Sherry. During the COVID pandemic, she has been involved in disseminating information in the vernacular on a WhatsApp group to rural health workers and supporting local caregivers of children with disabilities in terms of food parcels, wonder bags, and soup ingredients.
And our last panelist for today is Dr. Lungi Ehobe. She was born in KZN in a remote rural area called Mseleni. She completed her MBCHB at University of KwaZulu-Natal in 2006. She did her internship in McCord Hospital between 2007 and 2008. Her rural career started in 2009 at Bethesda Hospital, where she did her ComServe. In 2010, she thought she was done with medicine, but decided to join Mseleni Hospital for a few months, and this turned into 4 years. She joined the regional program in family medicine, which was based in Bethesda Hospital, with rotations to most KZN hospital specialized departments. She rejoined Mseleni team in 2018 as a medical officer, and this year stepped up to the medical manager position. She's currently doing her MMed, and she's the chairperson of the Rural Doctors Association of South Africa, RUDASA. She's married with 2 children. She is Christian and very passionate about spirituality, justice, empowerment, empowerment of different groups and strongly believes that gender-based violence is mostly due to the broken family structure and that united we can rebuild and fight this scourge together.
Thank you so much to each of you for availing yourselves for this conversation. We really look forward to hearing your wise words and to learning from each other, one woman to another. Without further ado, let's get right into it. The first question we have for you today is, what inspired you to be the woman you are today, and perhaps if you had any challenges that may have deterred you from being where you are now? Dr. Nash?
Thanks, Bert. I think looking back, when I moved to Miscellany, there weren't many women who'd been working in rural areas. There'd mainly been families, and I think I was very inspired to see families who had together. So I think specifically of Janet Giddy Reed, who later on became one of the mentors in the family medicine program. But what really has inspired me over the years is coming across amazing women, specifically in all cadres of healthcare, who really inspired and challenged us to step up. And I think quite a pivotal moment was when we were at Miscellany and we were having to advocate for the use of ARVs. At that stage, antiretrovirals were not available. And one of the doctors, who was actually a German doctor who had come to work at Miscellany, and he said to us very clearly that he remembers talking to his parents and saying to his parents, why didn't you stop what was going on with Hitler and the Nazis? And he sort of said to us, colleagues, we need to do something. We have the medical knowledge. This is our chance to stand up. We're obliged to do it. And those words stuck with us, and we ended up starting an antiretroviral program, CT, with money that was donated before the government actually did it. And I think that's what is stuck in my mind, is that we need to be accountable to our children and our grandchildren in the future by saying, this is our watch. We can't look away at some of the issues that are happening in our society. This is our watch, and we need to be able to say with pride at the end that we did what we could. We pushed the boundaries, we challenged society, we challenged the status quo, we challenged politicians to rethink things. And so I think it's a combination of working with very, very inspiring people over the years, seeing the resilience in communities. And when I used to go and do home visits at Miscellany and seeing very, very resilient women in communities who really had struggled, and yet they held their heads high. They were so proud of their community and their culture. And I think that's what we want. We want people to be proud of their communities, of their families, and to contribute to society with that pride. We don't want people to be broken down into something that they're not. I think I should stop there.
Wow, thank you for that, Dr. Nash. Dr. Hove, what inspired you to be the woman you are today?
Thank you for the opportunity. So I'm inspired by a few things. Firstly, I think at home it was mainly my mom, who was always a very strong woman, who worked at the local hospital as a nurse. And she didn't just do that, but she would come back home to be a mother to us. She was a role model. She was a mentor. She made sure that we dreamed, and that we dreamed big, and that when we have told her our dreams, she supported us through all of that, and made sure that we didn't stop dreaming. And then on top of that, she would sacrifice her everything, just so that we as her children could have what we needed whenever we needed it. So for me, that was a footing to want to be a great woman one day. Doing it for her, but also doing it for me, and making sure that I'm also doing it for the next generation. And then going back then to the career, I think when you realize in rural healthcare that no one is coming, you are it for these people, for these women who are suffering from domestic abuse every day, from these women who have no food to put on the table for their children, and they look up to you, for these women who walk for 2 hours before they can access medical care. You are it. No one else is coming. Then I think it goes back to what Jenny was saying, that we are obliged to offer that kind of care, and no one else is going to do it unless we as individuals then decide this is what we're going to do for our people. So our people could be anywhere in the country. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be where you were born. I think for me, it just happened to be here. I'm inspired by a whole lot of other things. I'm inspired by love. And I'm inspired by high quality medical care, which I think a lot of rural hospitals usually say, oh, but we do not have enough resources. How can we provide quality medical care? But if we realize that we can actually provide quality medical care even with the little that we have, yes, it's sometimes challenging, yes, it's sometimes impossible, but with the one patient that you can actually do it. I remember one case when I was still at Bethesda, who came in after poisoning, and her GPS was 3. And we couldn't find a bed anywhere else in ICU, so we decided we were going to ventilate him ourselves. He went out of the hospital alive, walking and talking, and we couldn't believe it. It was like a dream to us. So yes, such stories inspire me to want to do better every day. I think, yes, I will have to stop this for now.
Hi, Marika, can you hear us? Marika, can you hear us?
And I can't understand what anyone is saying. I'm going to disconnect and try again.
Marika,
Okay,
I can hear you.
I can hear you, Marika.
Okay, great. So you can see me and hear me, but I can't see and hear anybody else. I'm going to disconnect and reconnect.
I can't see Marika.
Lunki, your line gets a bit fuzzy. I'm not too sure if it's the same for other people, but you may have to drop your video when you speak, just to get a clearer audio.
Okay, awesome. Let me do that.
Okay, perhaps while we wait for Marika to join, we can just hear from Dr. Nomlindo as to, what inspired her, and maybe if there are some challenges that she faced along the way that could have deterred her from where she was now, but we'd like to hear from her.
Thank you. There are a few things that inspired me. First of all, I think my relationship with God and understanding that my job is not just a job, but is a calling. It's made me to really have a purpose for living. And one other thing is that I grew up in the rural area, having role models that were women. And most importantly, I was a pregnant baby who probably spent most of the time in hospital, in St. Barnabas Hospital, that was a rural area. And my twin was well, but most of my time, my childhood, I was always in hospital. And I saw these people were really caring. So during my ComCell, I decided that I'm going to go back to St. Barnabas to work there. And that really shaped me a lot to see the community, because my grandmother was working there as a nurse. When I went there to work there, the community was so grateful. And it was quite interesting to see women suffering, carrying these babies. It reminded me of my childhood. And then I said, I really owe it. I owe to that community. I owe to the community because I'm what I am because they invested in my life, in my childhood. And then for me, what really inspired me is caring for others, and especially the disadvantaged, and also making the difference inspires me and keep me going and make me to actually want to do my level best. So as my other, as I was finishing to my pediatric specialty, I developed a severe latex allergy, which really limited me in terms of doing that work. However, at the same time, it actually opened another door for me, a leadership role, and also made me to be a child health and an advocate for child health. Thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's so powerful. And I think a lot of people can relate to what inspired you as well. Mareike, can you hear us now? Can you see everyone? All right. In the meantime, we'll just hear from Dr. Pam as to what inspired her and what led her to become the wonderful and very successful OT that she is.
Okay, well, I must say this experience of being on this discussion is so reminiscent of rural areas that I just am loving it, because nothing is ever what you think it's going to be. Everything is challenging, everything is, you just got to be so adaptable, so flexible. And Mareike, I can just imagine her feelings as her laptop crashed. I mean, I was in the age before computers, so I was in the age before phones, when there was one phone in the whole hospital at Manguzi with a switchboard. But anyway, what inspired me, I was trying to think of the original thing that inspired me, and I think it was adventure. It wasn't a calling at that stage. It was just a feeling of curiosity. I wanted to find out what was the other side of the story of apartheid. I'd worked at Conwadi Hospital, where people were flown in from all over the Cape Province, Southwest Africa, with spinal injuries. A woman, and I was in the spinal injury unit, in where the people lay on their packs for 3 months, and a woman was brought in, a Herero woman, and I had to do OT with her. So I was like 22, and I'd never been in touch with any, really, Barry Gwyneth had just, it had, I'd had a couple of weeks there, but I didn't know much about people of other colors. And there was this woman, the only thing that was important for her was that her duk was correctly placed every morning. Everything else was unimportant. It really was humbling, and I learned a lot there. And then I went up to Oshakati and I learned even more. And then I became absolutely passionately interested in African basketry, African culture, and disability. And I think one of the things later on when I was at Baragwanath was that I had been taught at WITS to help people get into a bath, get onto a bed. But then people didn't have beds, didn't have baths, didn't have anything. And I want to know what the story was behind all of this. I was in Soweto the day before the Soweto riots. I was visiting a young man who had both his legs amputated by being thrown off a train. So I was there in the thick of it. And then when in 1978, I went to Manguzi. So opportunities present themselves when you have an intention. That's what I've learned. But what inspired me, my parents were fantastically supportive. They were absolutely amazing. But at Manguzi, it was the doctors, Dr. Dick Brzezinski, Dr. George Draper. There were just these amazing people, Dr. Steve Knight, Steve Reed, Jane Giddy, all of them, And then my co-workers, the people I worked with who went with me into the communities, Tier Fund, who supported us. Honestly, I still have a relationship with those people that I worked with. I visit them and we cry together and we laugh. And then disabled people, the mothers of disabled children, the tenacity, the challenges were that I was the only therapist north of the Tugela River. There were no other therapists, there were no social workers in those days, there was no communications, there were lots of challenges. Apartheid was a reality. There was fear, there was repression, one didn't know what was going on, and there was isolation. The realities were harsh and one couldn't get away from it. But somehow that's when the calling came, when the people believed in me and I could do something to change lives. That's what has kept me going all these years. And I'm still passionate and I still want to go back to Manguzi, and I'm just waiting to get up there again. Thanks.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much, Dr. Pam. I think what I've just gained from this audience is that regardless of how or where the inspiration is sourced from, is that it's just a calling that you just had to answer to, and that's so beautiful. I'm hoping that we can hear from Mareike now. Mareike, can you hear us? Can you see us? Is your line okay?
Can you guys hear me fine? Because you guys are still quite static, like broken up on sound.
I can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, otherwise I've posted the text in the chat box. Just in case. Okay. So yeah. So to the rest of the audience, I'm sorry for joining late. My computer crashed literally 10 minutes before it started. And then my phone decided that it wasn't going to sync. And then the reception crashed. And now I climbed to the top of a dune. I am resting on a pile of bricks and I'm hoping that everything continues. So
wow,
this is rural. This is what life throws at you. But also, students, you guys are super important. So perseverance is key. So yeah, I didn't really know how to answer this question. And I haven't heard the answers from everybody else, which has been sad because I was really looking forward to it. I'm just going to give a brief life story about how I came to where I came to, because I don't think I really had a plan, to be honest. So I come from a long line of very, very stubborn people. My family is the type that when life throws people lemons, they throw life a middle finger. And if it's a rule, it needs to be questioned and debated. And if it's a boundary, it must be tested and pushed. So I think that this stood me in good stead for a career in rural health. I grew up overseas and was very privileged to go to a really good international, well, a couple of international schools. We moved a lot. It encouraged creativity, and we were taught that the sky's the limit. I learned if you didn't ask, you didn't get, and if you didn't know, you knew where to go look for the answer. So this was a very privileged upbringing, for which I'm very thankful for. And these school years, they were charmed. They were former Yugoslavia. Into contact with lots of refugees, and just saw how society did not treat them with any decorum or respect. And literally the proverb, when the elephants fight the ground, was a very real thing there. My family moved back in 93, which was a very tumultuous period, and another steep learning curve for me, which had more questions than answers. And then by default, I found myself studying physio, paying for my varsity through waitressing and bartendering, which I think also stood me in good stead, because I've learned how to be very sociable and network. And at the end of my first year, I'd saved a little bit extra, just enough to throw on a backpack and go hitchhiking up into Zambia and Tanzania with my sister. My poor parents must have had heart failure by that stage. And in second year, we started working in public sector hospitals, which was another steep learning curve. And then I did an amazing final year rural block in pretty much an urban area. So I'm quite surprised it was such an amazing rural block, but it was the nail in the coffin that was it. I was going public sector and I was going rural. And I was going to change the things that were not okay. So much to my father's disgust, I took up a post at Manguzi Hospital in far northern KZN on the Mozambique border. So same as Pam. Pam was the starter of the service. I was kind of like joined about 20 years later. It wasn't the career path that my father had anticipated, because good girls with good grades do medicine and then they go into private. So a lesson that early on to your you need to stay strong and you need to stay focused. And it was also another baptism of fire for which my curriculum had definitely not prepared me. Luckily for me, I got to learn from the absolute very best in PHC, without whose guidance I literally would be nowhere. So I owe my career to the mentoring and absolutely saint-like tolerance of the likes of Jabu Ndlovu, Ivana Mgomezulu, S.B. Vamasi, and Etienne Immelman. And of course, the all men. People never gave up. I think that's also important. And I thrived because of the chaos and because of the creative challenges it offered. I'm not good with rules. I'm not good with structure. So it was actually my ideal environment. And because permanent therapist posts were almost non-existent at that time, you were kind of an anomaly. And I was thrust into provincial and national forums and conferences very early on in my career. So that's also probably because I just can't say no to anything. I'm like this pleaser person. And the longer I stayed in the same department, the more lessons I also learned. And I think is that you haven't even started learning what rural health is about after 5 years. After 10 years, you've got an inkling. After 15 years, you're starting to learn how much you stuffed up in the beginning. And it's a constant process. So stick it out, and it gets better and better and better and better. I dabbled in a master's in public health, and that helped like me put systems in place. And curiosity also just got me reflecting on successes and failures, and I have a pathological optimism. Always find the silver great plan. And I have a genetic stubbornness that just kept me there and kept me going. And the area is absolutely beautiful. The community is amazing, and the challenges never stopped. So I stayed and yeah, the exposure and the networking that being involved at this provincial and national level offered. I eventually secured funding from Discovery Foundation for HRD, so that's like skills development for the hospital through an NPO which we formed, and then that retained staff and helped us develop our rehab further. So we were always like 5 steps ahead of the game, and later on when we discussed COVID, I think that's played a major part in that we're always 2 steps ahead, you know. Because few and far between, you ended up participating outside of your immediate profession. So I got involved with RADASA, which is the Doctors Association. And then through that, Kate Sherry and I and Pam and the whole founded RURISA, which is the Rural Rehab South Africa, under a tree in the Drakensberg in the 2011 Rural Health Conference. And RURISA has in turn allowed us to advocate from outside the system whilst operating within the system, both at grassroots and at policy level. So I think like key thing is you can't win this battle, the social justice battle, with one line of attack. You've got to aim from all angles. And my father now became my most ardent supporter. So another lesson is just be patient. It can take time for other people to see your vision. And I think my last lesson is, because I spent quite a lot of time up at national level in the last 3 years, is don't get mesmerized by the big people up at policy level. It's important to influence the debate and loudly stand up for what is right. But you also need to have done your time and know what you're talking about. But the wheel turns slowly up and top, and it's easy to either get disheartened by lack of progress or to get blinded by the hierarchy and stuck on the treadmill of the nowhere. So be an outside agitator, because the biggest difference that you can make is down at the bottom.
Wow, thank you so much for that, Maraika. It was so great hearing how it all started, and you know what's inspired you and what's kept you going. I think you've honestly answered all the other questions we could possibly ask you in this talk. And thank you so much for that. So we'll just be moving on to our next question, which is an interesting one for women to answer, because a lot of sectors in society see it as a man's world, and I can't believe in 2020 that a lot of sectors are still men's world. So I wanted to ask you all, is rural healthcare a man's world? And what challenges and benefits do women particularly face in rural healthcare? And anyone can just jump at the answer.
Can I start? I think the challenges for women are that they're not heard, that intuition is not valued, and reason and logic rules the day in that type of situation. And so the whole thing of being a woman, you have to be, as Maraika said, you have to be very strong, and you have to know exactly what you think is wrong and just keep going for it. But often it's an intuitive thing that you're feeling this is wrong. You don't know the reasons, but you know in essence, I've got to do this. And that's the challenge. And I think the benefits, I'm just going to quickly do that, is that I think women have resilience, inner strength, good at interpersonal relationships generally. they have empathy, and they're able to see beyond the obvious facts. And I think that's what women bring to rural health. There's such a wonderful spirit when one is in those rural health conferences, the spirit of solidarity, men, women, everybody, they're there for each other. That's what I think women have brought to rural health.
It's Jenny. I agree with Pam. I think women are able to they're able to network and are very strong with relationships. And I think in rural settings, so much of medicine is about relationships. It's about building relationships amongst your team, and it's about valuing community relationships. And relationships are so key to how we understand whether medication is working, how we understand presentations, how disease is presenting, how we understand why the child is malnourished. So I think women are very intuitive, and it comes very easily for them. And I think that's why it's a real strength to have women working in rural areas. They also network very naturally, and so they are able to connect very easily to community health workers and to therapists. And so I think the multidisciplinary team comes a lot more naturally, because we're not so intent on hierarchy and organograms. We are relational people, and I think that's the beauty. And so I think that's what we bring to help. I think the other thing is that women multitask very well, and when you're in a rural hospital, as Lungi said, sometimes you're the only person, and maybe one or two of you on a weekend, and you have to make very quick decisions. You have to be able to view the information that's coming in, and if there's a big accident or there's a very sick patient in maternity, and you've got to make quick decisions, and you've got to be able to multitask with what's going on in theatre, what's happening in casualty. And I think women do that very well. And I think women also, they family orientated. And I think when women are in rural areas, they value families, and they speak very easily to community and to families about patients and what's happening to their relatives in the ward, or is more of a natural inclination to include family members. So I think that's what they bring. I think the stereotype, and Maria touched on a little bit, the stereotype is that when you're a doctor, then you're a therapist, you get a fancy private practice, and that's where your worth, and that's how you are measured by the success of that practice. And I think, I found that certainly in the beginning, when people would say, where are you working? And you would mention this little distant hospital in the middle of nowhere, and people would look a little bit kind of confused. And you're clearly not making it elsewhere, so you've had to go off and hide somewhere. And that's sometimes the danger or the expectation, is that society thinks that successful people work in big cities and they have successful big practices, and they don't picture they need people to be advocating and reaching out to rural communities. I think the other stereotype that in rural areas, sorry, you need that you need people, men around to sort things out. And I've seen women who are very good at fixing cars that break down, things that when you're driving on bumpy roads, sometimes you have all kinds of experiences. So I think the sort of stereotype of a professional in high heel shoes, the sort of pencil skirt, and that does not suit a rural kind of practitioner. You've got to be very willing to jump in and do whatever the moment arises. Sometimes I used to carry my gumboots in the car, because you never knew when you'd have to literally wait to get into a clinic. You've got to be able to be very flexible to your day, your plans. But I think that comes very naturally to women.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that.
Okay.
Okay. So
Dr.
for
Lumi, you can go.
myself, so I think for me, challenges most especially, is it a men's world? I don't think so. I think it's a give and take environment. If you come in and you're really passionate about being in rural, there is definitely space for you as a woman. You make it out what you want it to be. Some challenges, I think some people would say, oh, but there is no school for my children. A lot of people have actually decided to then leave rural healthcare just because they couldn't find a school. So there's a lot of homeschooling within rural hospitals. And I remember when we were in Bethesda, what we tried to do was actually get a teacher to then come in and do homeschooling for the children that were almost the same age within the hospital. So I think what is of benefit is, I think the previous speakers have already mentioned that you tend to network more. So you share challenges amongst each other because they're often common, and you come up with creative solutions to common problems. And sometimes those solutions can actually be shared with other rural hospitals and actually be shared countrywide in some instances. So that's actually quite inspirational on its own. I think the other thing which is most difficult for me, or which has been a personal challenge, is me coming back to my own community. And for those people that don't know, I'm actually also married into this community. So being rural, it does mean that they're still very cultural and very traditional. So you would find that there are challenges like, as a woman, you cannot stand up and talk to your elders in a certain way, or you can't look your elders in the eye when you're talking to them, or you can't be wearing pants and all those things. So I think, just like Jenny was saying, in relation to changing a car tire, I think rural medicine basically teaches you to first understand who you are as an individual, and then you can portray the person that you are to the community. And you will find that most of the time when you do that, then the community accepts you for who you are. Be clear from the beginning. If there are things that you are not comfortable doing, don't do them. You want to accommodate certain people. And when you have a certain way of doing things, do it and make others be aware that that's your way of doing things, and you want them to accept you the way that you are doing things. And that actually then benefits you in the long run, because you then infiltrate into the community, and you actually win that trust from the community. So personally, for me, there's a lot of boundaries that I've had to break joining Mareka's group. For instance, as a Makoti in this area, I shouldn't be wearing pants, but I had to sit my family down and say, look, I cannot be wearing long skirts to work. So in that regard, my family understands me, and then the community was very uncomfortable initially. But as they also learned that my family was comfortable with it, they actually then warmed up to the idea. And also, I think seeing the fact that pants don't change who I am inside, then also led to them, accepting me. And then I think the other big issue for especially, I would say, youngsters will be, but how do I shop when I'm rural? I think online shopping has just opened up a very lucrative, industry for rural healthcare workers, because then you can now order anything and it gets delivered to you. So yes, that's how you still have to drive long distances to go get food, but most of the stuff you can now get delivered to your door, which is just amazing. So I think I will end there.
Okay, thanks. I would like to just add and say women in rural health, they still face cultural barrier. There's a lack of trust and in their capabilities of women. So as a woman in rural health, you still have to work extra hard to earn trust and recognition from your counterparts. However, women in general, they are the main providers of healthcare, and they are primary caregivers at home and also in the formal health care system. However, they are not so well represented in terms of executive and management level positions. You'll find out that their potential and abilities, they are not matching the work they're given to do. However, things are changing a bit. Women now, they're in any discipline that were even disciplines that were previously perceived as men's jobs. But the women's success really lies in their nurturing spirit, in natural, and also in their passion in what they do. So if you empower a woman and you give them a space to reach their potential, they're valuable game changers in the healthcare setting. So you empower a woman, you are actually changing the whole system. So I think it's high time that we all invest in women. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Nomlindo. Maraika, can you hear us? I think your microphone is muted.
I can vaguely hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. I heard most of what the other speakers had said, and I completely and utterly agree. I had a bit of a laugh on this question because the first part of me is like, well, I think it depends on whether you allocate gender stereotyping to tasks and skills, because I've definitely won over the hearts and minds of my maintenance department because I can competently use a grinder, a jig, a drill, and a welder for my wheelchair workshop now. And I can alley dock a 10-ton truck on my first attempt. But that's really only a benefit to maintenance because now they don't really have to do any more work. It's not a prerequisite. But I think, like, onto a serious note, like misogyny and hierarchy and age and profession, race and class issues, they're issues which exist everywhere in society, whether you're urban or rural. And you're going to have to deal with it as best you can in that particular instant and context. And you're going to have to pick your battles well. But the best thing that you can do is just to reach out to other women and share your experiences. Like, don't bottle things up. Club together and come out and tackle problems together, because together in diversity, you'll achieve more. And not for each other when it's not okay. So from a professional environment, that would be my take. I think rural is more friendly than tertiary and central urban. So I think you'll find that it's not as bad. And I agree with Jenny as well, is that rural is really about giving people the time and listening to the stories, understanding the struggles and the social issues and the family issues, the inequalities, and all of the barriers that women face on a daily basis. And if you don't listen, you're going to get it wrong. And if you don't win their heart and soul first, you're going to fail with your medical intervention as well. So, yeah, you're going to miss the bigger picture unless you listen. And I think that as women, we are typically better at doing that. And we understand from where people are coming from as well. Health is much, much, much bigger than the narrow medical model that we're taught in. Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much for everyone on contributing to that question. I think I've just learned a lot just from listening to you.